don't treat your employees as the bad guys, as threat actors, right? You have to treat your employees as part of the solution and not the problem.
We're talking about SaaS adoption being like an addiction. There's a new SaaS application every 5-10 minutes.
I think that blocking employees from doing those things is a mistake.
When you have something like a tool that can use AI and for summarization, image generation, programming, really anything like that is great power.
Who says tech can't be human?
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite topics, AI and cybersecurity. And I don't think that there's anything more interesting in my world or really in the world of technology than AI and cybersecurity. So I'm excited to dig into these topics with a good friend that I've been knowing for many years. Today, our special guest is Jamie Blasco. Jamie is co-founder and CTO at Nudge Security. And I know, Jamie, you've been, doing a lot with threat intel, a lot with SaaS, and now we're going to put it all together today with a little bit of AI on top. But most importantly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so much for the invite, and looking forward to the discussion. As you said, we have known each other for a long time, and always enjoy talking to you. So it's gonna be fun.
So let's just jump right into it, right? We're gonna be talking about AI and cybersecurity. And you can't really think about AI today without also thinking about SaaS. I think SaaS really helps us interface with AI tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, so on and so forth. And what I've noticed is SaaS started out kind of as a necessity for productivity, and it feels like it's kind of turned into a bit of an addiction. What is your perspective on the SaaS adoption rate, but also how it fits into AI today?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things that, we took into account when we started the current company, right? We saw that trend of SaaS adoption growing very, 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 very fast. And, some of the trends like, COVID also, people working from home, they will pick whatever tools they were comfortable with. And then we saw that, IT and security teams were having a terrible time keeping up with this trend, right? Because it wasn't longer the case where you will ask IT for a SaaS tool. You'll just put your credit card and adopt that, right? As you mentioned, AI it's also, adding fuel to the fire, which is we see all these new tools all the time, which are so cool, make you so productive. But at the same time, those companies are moving super fast, and probably they're taking some shortcuts in terms of security posture, right? So that combination of how can you allow your employees to adopt the tools that make them productive, but at the same time reduce the risk and protect your company is going to be one of the big things where that companies need to focus on these days.
For sure. And what are you most excited about when it comes to AI, and also when it even comes to SaaS? What are the areas of opportunities, and what makes you most excited about those?
Yeah, personally, for my teams, we have found that Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and similar tooling to make developers more productive is just a no-brainer, right? It's so cool when I open my ID now, I'm probably 25% of the code is suggested to me now. It's just it's amazing. And I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, right? I think once we spend more time with the tools, be more comfortable with them and connect them to our, CI/CD, the environments a little bit closer, we're going to see so many new use cases showing up that are going to make, developers so productive. It's just insane. And, areas like unit testing, integration testing, and documentation, it just makes boring things that need to happen, but it makes it a little bit more manageable especially for smaller teams. And at the same time, when you are a junior developer, it just makes you move faster. It also will allow you to learn faster from your coworkers. So it's just a lot of great use cases we are seeing now.
So think back for a second when you were earlier on in your career. When we first met, you were focused on threat intelligence. You were working at Alien Vault and had a great and successful run then. Walk us through a little bit about, what were you doing at Alien Vault and threat intelligence? And do you see a use case or a way that you could have used AI if it was available back then?
Yeah, for sure. And so I was leading research and also a machine learning team at Alienable and then AT&T, right? So we were actually applying machine learning early on. What has happened though is the new developments with transformers and especially large language models is just allowing many new use cases that before were not possible, right? But back in the day we would use traditional machine learning, things like boosted trees, or even some neural networks. But it was a little bit different. It was more about supervised learning, meaning you will have to have use cases where you have a lot of labeled data. And some of the early successes there were malware classification, right? Because we have years and years of malware samples and then classifications for antivirus engines and other heuristics, so we could actually trace those models. And we also did research in areas like the DGA detection for malicious domains.
That was a big one.
Yeah, even classifying domains for tons of different features that we will build, things like IP information, domain reputation, just putting all that together and building classifiers. So it was it was great. Even from a threat intelligence perspective, we were applying unsupervised learning to cluster infrastructure. One of the cool projects that we were working on was can we actually anticipate malicious infrastructure that we know it's gonna show up in certain ASNs and automatically classify that as it appears before it's being used for malicious purposes. So we will build these huge clusters of infrastructure, anything from, whois data to server information to application information. And then we will wait for that infrastructure to be used, find those signals, and then predict from now on other similar infrastructure that was going to be used by that threat actor. You asked how we are using that today. One of the interesting use cases that we are working at Nudge is we are building this, we are giving customers this huge database of supply chain. So basically we are able to map all your SaaS vendors, but at the same time, we are able to tell you who your SaaS vendors are, right? And the way we do that is really applying similar techniques that we used to use in threat intelligence, which is, if I can scan the internet, if I can do things like passive DNS, and domain analysis and look at things like JavaScript that you include in your website, look at content security policies, I can build this huge database of what vendors you are leveraging because those little snippets that you leave around your infrastructure. So it's funny that using some of those same techniques we used to use to find malicious infrastructure, we can use to actually map that supply chain infrastructure for our customers today.
That's awesome. It reminds me they're almost one and the same because you were looking for malicious infrastructure, and in some cases, having unsanctioned SaaS applications is almost like having malicious infrastructure that your employees are using. And when you have something like a tool that can use AI and for summarization, image generation, programming, really anything that is great power. You can augment some of your work to a machine. Maybe you can make your work a little bit faster. But with any type of power, as Uncle Ben said, great power comes great responsibility. That's where I think the gap is when it comes to security is finding the shadow IT, finding which SaaS applications your users are using, even if they are sanctioned and allowed, just having that inventory. What have you seen to be successful from, focusing on Nudge for finding those unsanctioned, unprovisioned, unknown applications?
Yeah, definitely. So two core things that we found, and it's kind of like the foundation of our company, right? One is you can't protect your SaaS applications if you don't know what applications there are, right? Like,
Yep.
and we see a lot of SaaS security companies focusing on that second part of the equation, which is like, tell me your 10 SaaS applications and connect them, each of them, and then I'm gonna tell you what's wrong. And that's great. But what about the other 300 applications that your employees are using that you don't even know about, right? So that's the first core problem that we focus on at Natch. And to be fair, back in the day when we started Alienable, it was kind of the same. It's like companies didn't have any sort of visibility in terms of network data and telemetry from endpoints or log data, right? So like, it was first, well, let's solve the visibility problem, and then you can focus on solving all of the other problems, right? So interestingly, the way we saw companies trying to solve this problem, like how do I discover all those SaaS applications? We saw a lot of problems, right? Like we saw people mining expense reports, right? But great, I'm gonna give you a list of things. You don't know who is using it. You don't know how many people are using it, how often. So that's a problem. You can do network analysis. Well, again, many problems with like, do you have visibility into every single endpoint, like mobile phones, endpoints? Do you know what those, network patterns look like when people are using? It's someone visiting GitHub to look at documentation, or is someone visiting GitHub to actually use GitHub as a source code repository, right? So there are many, many details from the network perspective and from the endpoint perspective. So we came up with a very novel approach, which is like, nowadays, every time you create an account in a SaaS provider, the first thing that they do is like send you an email, right? So like, welcome Ron to salesforce.com. Thank you for enabling two-factor authentication. Hey Ron, you just forgot your password. Here's the link. So the technology that we built is like a really simple connection to your Office 365 or Google Workspace APIs, where we do very targeted searches for those emails, and we're able within seconds, minutes, or depending on how big your organization is, not ever more than a few hours, we can give you visibility into every single account that has been created ever by any employee, and then provide analytics on top of that, and a lot of use cases. But that's really the core, discovery process that we came up with. Then we complement that with things like OAuth grants, right? Like, when you log in with Google or log in with Microsoft, and then you can connect that to other data sources like your IDP, like your Oktas and Azure ADs of the world. And that gives you a really amazing visibility in real time of every application, and also enables you to be proactive about that. And that's kind of like the second part of the story, and why we are called Natch Security, right? Which is, we encourage people to automatically engage with those employees as they are making decisions, right? So if you are about to adopt a new SaaS tool, we see that you create an account, we can automatically nudge you and ask you about how you're going to use this. Or maybe we can provide some policies in terms of how you're supposed to use it. So, our tool really allows people to create those automations to engage with the employees. And really it's about your employees don't treat your employees as the bad guys, as, threat actors, right? You have to treat your employees as part of the solution and not the problem. And that's really the philosophy that we are trying to build at Natch.
Yeah, I love the name because that's essentially what you want to do with your employees. You don't want to have them hold their hand out and smack it. You want to nudge them into doing the right things, or at least asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard of any company that's taken that approach. I've actually worked at attack surface management companies, and everyone gets so obsessed with API integrations. Like, okay, let me just connect up to every single API. Well, those things take time to develop and implement into any product. And then, we're talking about SaaS adoption being like an addiction. There's a new SaaS application every 5-10 minutes. especially with, Chat GPT being out, Copilot being out. Like I'm coding a lot more nowadays just because I have access to a little bit of help and kind of like a pair programming buddy. When you look at applications like Chat GPT, even using Midjourney and Discord, what are the risks, right? Like why would a company want to nudge their employees to think twice about using those tools?
Yeah. So here it's every company is gonna have a different risk, appetite and different policies, right? And we are seeing both sides of the spectrum, right? On one side, we have companies like JP Morgan and Amazon and Bank of America that publicly say we don't allow employees to use ChatGPT. It's just too much risk for us, right? They are not sure about how the data is being used, if that data is going to be used for training future models. They don't know where the data is going to end up with. And sometimes they're even competing with those providers, right?
Yep.
Like Microsoft or Amazon. So I still think that's going to be the case for the 1%. And, I always come back to the 1%ers in cybersecurity, which is like those wealthy companies that have resources to attack problems that way, which is like, no, I'm gonna invest millions of dollars on making sure people can use this tool, and maybe I'm gonna even build internally a similar tool that employees can use. That's not the case with the vast majority of companies out there, right? Like I think most companies out there want to make sure that the employees can use those tools so they can be more productive, right? And more innovative. Like I think like blocking employees from doing those things is a mistake. So I think the approach that we are advocating for, which is providing those nudges, right? It's like, hey, be careful what data you are uploading here, or, by policy, you can only do X, Y, and Z. Or even like, hey, we're already paying for this tool. You shouldn't be using this tool. Here is a license for another tool that, we already did a security review for. It already went through procurement. So there are many things you can do. Or even simple things like, make sure you enable two-factor authentication. Or in many cases, we know already if it's not enabled, and nudge them to actually, hey, you are not using SSO for this, please enable two-factor authentication. And in some cases, you can even do it yourself, right? But, it varies on those use cases. I think the second problem we're seeing is like, it's not just the applications, the SaaS applications that employees are bringing, but it's like the new trend of productivity tools where you connect things together, right? So it's like, all of this sudden, you have 100 different OAuth grants that you have, granted in Google, because like you connect your Zapier to your Salesforce or your Hotspot, and Hotspot to your Segment, and Segment to your, it's just like interconnectivity of SaaS tools. And let me tell you something, like traditional cybersecurity tools are not suited for that, right? Like there's no endpoints, there's no network, like it's vendor to vendor communication. So like you need a completely different approach to really deal with risk when you see those, connectivities across different applications.
I'm going to jump in for a second. Jaime and the Nudge team wanted me to ask you, our listeners, a question. Are your employees practicing safe SaaS? The best way to find out is with Nudge Security. They have a patented approach to SaaS discovery that gives you a full inventory of all of your apps ever introduced by anyone in your org. And it's all done in minutes. Their solution also provides automated workflows that make it easy to nudge your employees to take simple yet impactful security steps like enabling single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and revoking risky OAuth grants to finally disable all of those accounts that are no longer needed. Start taking control of SaaS Sprawl now with a free 14-day trial and see it for yourself. So please visit nudgesecurity.com/Hacker Valley to get started right now. And with that, let's jump back into the episode. Yeah, for sure. And, like another thing that I hear over and over again, especially on social media from cybersecurity practitioners, is don't use ChatGPT because you never know what they're using that data for. Like you're putting in information into the tool as a prompt, And are they using it for training? Are they using it for just like analytics for another, any type of use cases? It's not very clear what companies are using it for, but it's interesting because many tools now have an AI function. One tool that we use a lot at Hacker Valley is Notion.
Mhm.
And that's one tool that you wouldn't expect to use your data in a machine learning way to help support other customers. So, like, what I hear a lot is third party risk is a big thing. It's hard to grasp, especially from a SaaS perspective. When you go through that due diligence for one organization and then 6 months later they have a machine learning capability or AI, large language model capability, is it time to go back and then reevaluate like the privacy policy and how they use your data? How would you approach that?
Yeah, it really depends on the use case, right? If in the case of Notion, I mean, they already had access to your whatever data you were storing there, right? It's just like, well, now they may be using a third party, API like, OpenAI, GPT-3, GPT-4, whatever it is, or other APIs. So like, it's also knowing where the sub processors are. Like maybe it's not Notion the one, and I can remember now. I do feel like Notion is using OpenAI API. So like now all of this other is not just Notion, right? It's like there's another third party that is has
Yes.
access to your data. So again, that use case where you are able to map those relationships across SaaS services becomes really important when looking at this risk, right? And all of the other things that I will look at is like SOC 2 certifications, reviewing those documents, making sure you feel comfortable with the controls that they have in place. Anything from what other tooling they're using from a security perspective, right? Like there's a lot of information you can collect to make sure that you feel comfortable. And my favorite one, really, especially for smaller companies, is like it's kind of like crowdsource that assessment. Is like if you have companies with big security teams, like Google or Netflix or Facebook, and they're using those tools, it means they have already gone through a pretty tough, assessment. So like if you're a small company, there isn't much you can add there. So that trust relationship between, what are their existing customers, and that can be a pretty good signal to feel more comfortable with, adopting some of those tools.
Yeah. And I really liked what you were saying about almost like your integrations, like you integrate SAP to Slack and then Slack to Google Workspace to Zoom. And now you have this sprawl of data. You don't really know who has access, ownership. How do you and what are you all doing at Nudge to make sense out of it all? Because I'm sure it's a lot of like it's almost like unraveling a ball of yarn.
Yeah, so in terms of our product, we have the ability to build that graph of relationships in terms of connectivity across certain apps. Like think about Slack, think about Zoom, Okta, Google, Microsoft. So we're able to find those grants and actually create risk profiles for those. It's not
Mm,
just it's about what type of access they have, how are they accessing the data, between which applications, how many users are using it, like how popular that application is, like is this something that showed up yesterday, or is this an established company that has been going on for a while, right? So there's a lot of features you can pull in order to build those risk profiles and help companies really focus on what's more important, because every time we bring a new customer, they all of this island, they are dealing with tens of thousands of accounts and tens of thousands of old grants that they don't even know existed, right? Because it's so easy to click that yes, I authorize whatever with to get access to my calendar or whatever, right? So
mm-hmm.
it's an interesting problem for sure.
Just click yes, yes, yes all the way through. Updated privacy policy, hit yes.
Yeah, I know most people don't pay attention to that anymore. It's just they just wanna move forward, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned you use Copilot. It maybe, writes 15% of your code and you have a team of developers. So give us a bit of a rundown as to what type of AI Nudge is using. Like, what kind of strategies are you employing? What are you seeing as helpful? Kind of like, I want to be inspired as well as, someone that's a AI enthusiast.
Yeah. So the main part and then the core functionality where we are actually applying a lot of AI is really on that email classification, right? So the algorithm that we build it's based on the premise that we don't need to know a SaaS application exists in advance. The algorithm is able to figure out this is a SaaS application because I found certain patterns. I classify those patterns with a supervised approach. We use BERT in this case, but one of the early kind of like LLMs, and then we classify those emails, and then from now on we start getting information about what that application is, what it means, who created it, and that's all automated and driven through different machine learning approaches. So you don't have to have manual labor to classify every single one because it's unmanageable, right? It's not only unmanageable, but also you can never do it as fast as having a pretty good algorithm that does that for you. So the minute there's a new application, that it's gonna be found, it's gonna be classified properly, and customers can get information out of it. And same thing for those supply chain use cases, right? Like how we find that information. We do a lot of text classification as well to like find compliance certifications or find subprocessors. Like there's a lot of signals we collect, and we apply those techniques in order to help us with automation.
Love it. So one thing we didn't get to speak about is what was the premise behind Nudge? Like, where did the idea come from originally? Like, I'm sure you had to do a lot of research, maybe speak to some security experts, CISOs. How did you narrow in on SaaS and protecting it this way?
Yeah, so Raz Spittler, which is my co-founder, he got us started a little bit earlier. And he was initially focused on this use case for consumers, right? So the idea was like consumers don't know where, what accounts they have created, where they have, added credit card information. So like the idea was like, how can we help consumers do that? And then, he reached out to me. I'm like, I'm not doing a consumer company. And I think this problem is actually much more acute on the enterprise. And then we kind of like started talking to CISOs, and, they confirm our suspicion, right? Which is like a lot of most organizations out there are in this situation where they don't have a clear, understanding of what's out there. And then they don't have good processes to deal with this, right? I think it helped that some of the organizations we have worked with before, especially large enterprises, we saw they were actually approaching this problem with like the examples we gave with the Amazons of the world, the Bank of Americas of the world, which is like blocking first. And we think that those organizations are gonna have a really hard time remaining competitive in this environment, right? Mm-hmm. It's just you're going to have a hard time keeping people happy and keeping employees engaged because they want to use the tools that they like and not the tools that you're forcing into them. And then you're going to, we're seeing developments every single week, right? Every single week there's new tooling, there's new research. And, by the time you have done all that manual validation and risk profile and, procurement processes, like, it may be too late, right? So like, I feel like there has to be more automation, and we need to rethink that block first approach when it comes to adoption of these tools, right? I think that those companies are gonna have a hard time. I'm not saying you can't block things, right? And don't get me wrong. What I'm saying that can be the default for this type of problem, right? When you are dealing with malware, great. Yes, you had to block first. But when you are dealing with an employee trying to get their work done in a more productive way, I think blocking them and it's the wrong approach. We do have some research. We actually, one of our advisors is a professor of psychology, and we have a great white paper in our website where they did some research where they will have different approaches, right? With like a set of people, they will block them or they will nudge them, and then we can prove that actually nudging in the long term is a much successful technique when it comes to this, because you know what, like people are gonna go around your controls. Like if you're blocking them, they're gonna go to their personal devices, they're gonna create an account, and then you are burying this monster under the table, right? Like instead of like making sure you deal with the problem, you're just burying that problem underground, and it's gonna become a bigger problem in the future, right? So I think that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, I really like the idea of bringing in a psychologist to help, uncover what is the behavior that is most rewarding and that's going to really accelerate innovation, because that's the name of the game: accelerating innovation, growing the business. I really like that you all brought in a psychologist there. What was the reasoning behind that? Like, whose idea was that?
It was Rice's idea, and I think the main, I mean, we all want to have data to support the the ideas that we have and the things that we believe are true, right? So we want to have data that actually hopefully supports those ideas, and maybe it doesn't, but that's totally fine. Maybe we were wrong, but so far what we have seen is like we are in a good path, right? And that data is supporting the idea that yes, engaging with employees it's better than blocking them from doing everything. I think the other important piece is like the culture in companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are preventing people from doing everything, they're not gonna trust you, right? And more importantly, if they know you are monitoring them and you are like blocking them from doing what they want, but instead, if you engage with them and you offer help, or more importantly, you offer their opinion, you ask for their opinion, they're gonna become part of the team, and they're gonna feel like the company is, they're a part of the company, they're part of the team, and that it's not just the security team at the rest of the company. It's like the security team should be every single person at the company, right? Because we all know, we have done this for many, many years. Like everyone can, like we have so many stories of like random employees that were critical to find a breach before it happened, right? Because there was something off. And if you train them, if you engage with them, they're always there to help the security team, and not just like think that the security team is the enemy and I just need to go around them. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to get anything done, right?
Yeah. When we first were speaking about Nudge and, kind of like the strengths that you bring to the table for organizations, one of the things I loved the most was the ease of onboarding. Everyone uses email. You pointed out your email provider, and then boom, you have a list of SaaS applications. What would you say has been the biggest success story so far with Nudge and the customers and prospects that you worked with?
So one of the biggest successes, and again, I want to be careful here in terms of like, I don't want people to feel that like, when breaches happen, that's good for us. That's not the message. But, let's say that we have been lucky enough that in the last, 3 years, there has been many breaches affecting SaaS providers, right? We have seen LastPass, we have seen Okta, we have seen, Twilio, like many SaaS providers, right? So that has reinforced the story that SaaS is actually critical for organizations these days. It's not longer your software supply chain. That's great, and people are spending a lot of resources on that. But your SaaS supply chain, I will argue, it's sometimes even more important, and it's at risk right now, right? Because we are seeing, just today or yesterday, I think Mandiant finally published details about the latest, supply chain compromise of a SaaS provider that I'm not gonna name. But we have certain threat actors. In this case, it was a North Korean actor that was targeting SaaS companies that had customers in the crypto and fintech spaces, right? Because we know they have large teams focusing on stealing cryptocurrencies and bringing revenue to North Korea,
Right.
using that. So all those things are helping us. And then every time one of those breaches happen, what we do is we automatically notify our customers, not only about whether they were a customer of that SaaS provider, but actually we send them a list of the supply chain. So like maybe you're not, maybe you are not a customer of LastPass, but these are your 10 critical SaaS providers that are actually using LastPass. So you probably wanna contact them, make sure that they did a risk assessment, and you probably wanna keep an eye on that and figure out if you need to, rotate certain credentials, et cetera, et cetera. So that's super important. And then when we send those notifications, many times customers call us back and it's like, oh my gosh, you just saved our day because, you were right. There was something wrong there. Or things like, we thought we didn't use LastPass, but actually we used to have a CFO that used LastPass in the past and no one ever deleted that account. Right. So that account still had, access to certain credentials. So it's a nightmare out there. Again, because that visibility, most companies don't understand, what's out there and how powerful that visibility becomes once you have it.
Yeah, I think SaaS can be a nightmare, especially in the terms of security, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I think luckily, with companies like yours, Nudge Security, that's starting to change and it's becoming a bit more manageable for someone that wants that one piece of advice or that place to start for just being a little bit more secure when it comes to SaaS security. What would be your advice? What would be your advice to them?
I think, engaging on defining policies and having visibility early on, it's super important. Like the sooner the later, right? When you have 10 employees, it's pretty easy to have that visibility and set some precedents so people understand the policy and, some basic training on, what to look at. But once you become, like 1,000, 2,000 people organization, if you haven't done anything about it, it's just, a nightmare. And we work with a lot of those organizations where they were, tech startups, like high growing companies. They grew so fast. Everything was using different tools and that was fine. But at some point, you have to say, well, this is too much risk for me, right? I need to make sure I have a process in place and I can put some controls in place. So at the very least, I know what's going on, right? And that's, I think that visibility piece is where people need to start. I mean, without visibility, you can't, we always say this and it's cliche, right? But you can't protect what you can see, right? If you don't know what it is, how are you going to make sure things are right?
That's it. That's a huge piece of advice. Start now. It's never too late to start. And you can't protect what you can't see. So the only way you can do it is by doing it. Jaime, thanks again for jumping on the mics, sharing some time, also letting us know about Nudge Security, wishing you and the company the best. For anyone that wants to stay up to date with Jaime and also Nudge Security, check out the show notes and description wherever you're listening or watching this episode. And with that, we'll see everyone next time.